Welcome to Financial Issues, where we join reality with truth, helping you make the most of your money by honoring God with your investments. Now listen in as we give you the practical tools and advice you need to become a biblically responsible investor.
Welcome to Financial Issues. Thanks for tuning in today. I'm your host, Shana, and we're going to be talking about financial issues from a biblical worldview. So we'll be talking about defunding darkness, biblically responsible investing. You can find out more about our strategy at financialissues.org. This is where we screen out the companies of corporate America that are using shareholder dollars to support an ungodly agenda. So using those dollars to support things like abortion, pornography, the LGBTQ agenda, and things like that. We also encourage you to be a joyful and generous giver, to embrace our stewardship responsibilities that the Lord gives us. So to be, we call that funding the light. And we hope that you're already a joyful, generous, and obedient giver to the ministries that the Lord has asked you to support. But if you're looking for more, we've got some great ones. Our ministry is one. We also have Preborn Ministries, who is instrumental in pushing back against the darkness of abortion, and Crossroads Kids Club, which is an organization, a ministry that helps to get the gospel preached in public elementary schools. So getting the gospel to the children. So if you want to support either one of those ministries, go to financialissues.org and you can find out more about them. On today's show, we're going to get some of your questions answered. So we've got sort of a backlog of questions that have come in through the website, through Ask Shana, and we're going to get those addressed today. And we're also going to start to talk about some of the things that we are going to see changing in 2025. And I've invited my friend and colleague, Jason MacDowell, back, and he's going to come on a little bit later in the show. And we're going to talk about some of the ways that you can invest through your employer. But first, let's get to the stewardship verse of the day. It comes from 1 Peter 5, 6, and 7. Therefore, humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time, casting all your cares upon him, for he cares for you. So, 2025. New year, new you. How many times have you seen that on social media and so many other places? Well, the beginning of the year is often a time for self-reflection. Self-reflection's good. Change is good, especially when we lovingly inspect our own lives and identify unhealthy habits that could be holding us back in God's will for us, which is to be healthy, wealthy, and wise. Now, not as the world understands those concepts, but rather as God intends them. So it is good wisdom, as found here in the scriptures, to first humble ourselves before God and allow him to write the plans for positive change for the new year. Don't worry about all those self-help books and those programs that are popping up in your social media feed. Just get in the Word of God. It's the best source. In my experience, God always has better plans, better ideas than the things that I come up with in my own understanding. What do you think, Seth?
That's awesome, Shana. You know, as you were talking there, it got me to thinking there's a lot of people, even in Christian circles, who will talk about, wanting at the new year to become a better version of yourself, become a better you. I've often found that it goes far better, and I think the scripture would back me up on this, when we become less like ourselves and we become more like Christ.
Yes.
So less of become a better version of yourself, and more of let's become more like Christ and less like ourselves. Shana, the new year often brings new fears and worries. And I hope that our listeners will take comfort from this verse in 1 Peter, that we can cast these cares upon God, for he does care for us, and he has the future in his hand. We serve a God who's in control of all things. He deeply loves his children, and so let's cast our cares on him. Shana, I do think that's a stewardship issue for us as well, that we don't meddle in our cares and worries. To be a good steward of them means to cast them upon God and let him take care of them.
That's good.
So hopefully that can be an encouragement to our listeners today, Shana. Well, as you said, we have a big backlog of questions. So you want to get to some of these here?
Let's do it.
All right, let's start with Pete in Seattle. Pete is 64, and he's saying, hi, Shana. You recommended selling E44 and later E22. I believe this was back in 2024, Shana. So Pete says, I sold it all. In your alert from October of 2024, you said there are or will be soon companies that are just as good or better on the buy list. What company in the same subsector as E44 and E22 do you recommend as being better, or better yet, the best at this point? We have nothing remaining in that subsector, and you're optimistic about energy, so I need to act. What advice do you have for Pete?
Well, we've got several in the utilities, in the energy sector that came. I'm trying to get to it right now. Let's see. We've got 6 stocks in the energy sector. So there's some great stocks that are there. Now, I don't know if Pete is looking for income, if he's looking for growth. He says he's age 64, so maybe a little bit of both. And what I would say, Pete, is that take a look at what you already have. Look at the companies that you already have, and then as you're looking at the 6 that are on the list, try to pick something that's going to give you a little bit of diversification, something that's a little bit different than what you have. It should really be pretty easy once you just go and read the descriptions of what the companies that are there.
Awesome, Shana. Chris is up next here, 54 years old. The first question of 2025 for Chris, so hopefully Chris has many more after this. Yeah. He says, the subject came up about good things to give children who may have everything they need, for example, in the Christmas celebration. I know way back, sometimes we as kids would get actual stock certificates, which were hard to cash, and that could be a very good thing, or bonds as well. So what would you suggest giving young grandkids ages 1 to 7 years old that would appreciate over their years and not be easily cashed in? It's a good question from Chris.
That is a good question.
Yeah.
Yep. And I like the way that you're thinking, Chris. You know, it's fairly inexpensive to give a 1 to 7 year old something that they will play with for hours that doesn't cost you a whole lot of money. Yeah. So, you know, it gets harder, I guess, as the kids get older because their toys get more expensive.
Yeah, they do.
But, you know,
more electronic too, I've found also.
Yes, they do. Yeah, they do. I can confirm.
Yeah.
So one thing that you could do is open an investment account for them as a custodial account. That makes it a little bit harder for them to cash in, at least until they get to the age of majority in whatever state that you live in. So, you know, you as a parent, a grandparent, you can open what's called a custodial account for a kid. And it is an irrevocable gift to the kids, so they do get it when they turn the age of majority, and then they can do whatever they want with it. But until that time, you control where it's invested, if it's distributed to the kids for anything that they might need growing up. So, and most of the time, how do you tell your 7-year-old that they have a stock account? Most people just don't. You know, you just take control of that and do it for them, and then it gives you a great opportunity to teach them about money, about how it grows, and the importance of biblically responsible investing in the years that you would be leading up to turning that over to them.
Yeah, awesome, Shannon. That's great stuff. Jock is up next here, and a question that we looked at from time to time throughout 2024. He's wondering, do you have anything to say regarding Newsmax's pre-IPO offering of preferred shares at 7%? Jock's 77 years old.
No, it's not something that's really on our list. I believe the last time I looked at it anyway, it was for accredited investors only. So if you don't know what an accredited investor is, you're probably not one. You have to have either certain levels of income or certain levels of net worth to even be able to do that. A lot of times, those types of investments come with very high minimums. So, you know, no, it's not something that's on our horizon. I think there are, even 7% sounds great, but go take a look at our buy list in the REIT sector and even the energy sector, and the financial sector. You're going to find yields a lot higher than that.
Yeah. Great, Shana. That's awesome. Terry's up next here, 71 years old. Terry's asking about CD55. He said it recently made a cash distribution and there was a 4-to-1 stock split. These events happened while I've been moving, thinking not much is really going to change during this time and not listening to the program as much. Could you please re-comment on these events for me? What do you think?
Yeah, so stock splits are fairly common. They happen all the time, and it's really sort of a non-event. It's more of a psychological event. People will look at the price of a stock, and then they'll make some judgments about whether it's a good value to buy it or not based on the stock price. Now, that's a horrible idea to do. But it does happen. People think if a stock price is $10, that it's a better value than a stock that is $100. But that's not true at all. There's a lot of other metrics that you have to factor in there. So basically what happens for this particular company, if on December 19th you had 10 shares worth $260 per share, well, the next day you ended up with 50 shares at $52 a share. So it's essentially the same value at the time that it takes place. But what the company is hoping that happens is that there's a psychological effect, and it gives the stock more room to grow. So I hear the music. That means we've got to take a break, and we've got Jason MacDowell on deck coming back. So stay tuned. Right after this break, we'll be back with more financial issues.
Navigating through investment options can be challenging, especially when you're determined to uphold your God-given values. Every dollar you invest is a vote for the world that you want to live in. Let your values guide your investment decisions and help to shape the culture in which we live. Become a beacon of light and pave the way with biblically responsible investing. Timothy Plan, where faith and finance collide. Before investing, carefully consider the fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses of the investment company. This and other important information can be found in the fund's prospectus. To obtain a copy, visit timothyplan.com or call 800-846-7526. Read each prospectus carefully before investing. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal.
I like Crossroads because we play fun activities and we learn about the Word of God.
It's a great way for kids to give their life to Jesus, especially when they don't know who He is.
That's why we're launching our Drive for 5 in 2025 campaign. We are committed to adding 5 more regional coordinators for a total of 11 next year, reaching more kids than ever before.
Please join us for this Drive for 5 in 2025.
Help spread the love of Jesus to children across the country. Go to crossroadskidsclub.com/5 in 2025.
If a woman sees her baby on ultrasound, it doubles the likelihood that she'll choose life. And on top of that, we share the gospel of Jesus Christ with her. This is why you should support preborn. The donations that you give actually make a difference. Last year, 59,000 babies were saved because of what you have done with your generosity.
To find out how you can support the life-saving mission of preborn, go to preborn.com/FISM.
Welcome back to Financial Issues. Thanks for sticking with us. Well, new year, lots of things. So lots of change coming in 2025. And I've invited my friend and colleague, Jason MacDowell, back to talk with us, I guess, about some of the things that are going to be changing in 2025. I guess we really won't know. I mean, there's a lot of talk right now. There's a lot of speculation about things that could happen, may happen, will probably happen. But we won't really know until just a few short, not even weeks, I guess, when President Trump takes office and starts enacting his agenda, and the agenda that was mandated by we the people. So we've got a new year, a new president, new-ish Congress, some of the same old, but we do have a new majority-minority makeup. We've got a new direction. We're going to be putting the principles of DEI and the values of the loud minorities in the past and not forcing them on the majority any longer. Hopefully, we will be doing a U-turn in this country back to traditional Judeo-Christian values that this country was founded on. So, Jason, thanks for being here today. Let's specifically talk about some of the changes that are coming down the pike, or I guess that are already present for 2025, especially with in regards to the TCJA, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. That's going to be expiring or renewing or whatever's going to happen to it this year, and in regards to employer-sponsored plans, because people are starting to get their financial houses in order, and part of that is the way that they save and invest through their company. So what's on deck?
What's on deck? Yeah, so for my expectations this year is hopefully we have a new tax law, because the current one, like you mentioned, actually expires at the end of this year, December 31st. That's TCJA, as you mentioned. So looking for renewal there, or a whole new overhauled tax. Trump mentioned the other day, this past week here, I think it was January 6th, that he would like Congress to pass his agenda of cutting taxes. So he mentions the first thing, tightening border entries, and then boosting fossil fuel as quick as possible in one bill or two. So part of that is, wow, you can put everything, the entire agenda, into one bill. Why, hopefully there's some transparency there. So I'm hoping that this theme of government transparency, clean bills, will implement in a tax bill so that we can take a look at it. I know Elon's even talked about wanting some time for the public to review bills before any voting. I think he said about 7 days or so. I actually like that. Don't mind the one bill and getting it through, but let's see what it says.
I kind of hate the one bill thing, because it makes people really, have to consolidate all of their views. You can't have separate opinions on different things. You have to, and in Congress, you always have to compromise to get, I guess, certain things done. But, that however many pages it was, over 1,000 pages that they tried to get through, with the continuing resolution for the spending just to keep the government open. And I hate it that that's how Congress works. It's like, oh, it's last minute, we've got to do all this just to keep the doors open. And so I hope that there is some transparency, because right now, what average American has time to go read a 1,000-page bill, understand it, and then contact their congressperson to say, hey, here's how I'd like you to vote on it. It's just, there's just no time for it. So it really changes things in a way. So let's talk about some of the changes that are coming to the employer-sponsored retirement plans. So those are going to be things like your 401k, your 403b if you work for a nonprofit organization, maybe your TSP plan, or all of those employer-sponsored plans. So what's coming down the pike there?
Yeah, perfect. So what we do know for transparency is that they're up for 401ks, just about a nominal amount, about $500. So the contribution limit for individuals about $23,500 in this case. The IRS also, interestingly enough, didn't change the individual accounts contribution limit. So that's IRAs, so individual retirement accounts, and then the Roth IRAs. They're actually saying the same as last year. It's about $7,000 if you're under 50, and then there's a catch-up contribution max of $8,000, or an additional $1,000 to that if you're age 50 or older. So no increases to those like last year. We're kind of looking at that as a good thing, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. for high-income people, I'm really not mad about it that they haven't increased the individual limits as well, because for most people, the high limits for employer-sponsored plans, I think, really kind of encourages people to sock away as much money as they can into retirement plans. And I think that's the way that the financial planning community has really trained people up to this point. But, I don't really like to see, you and I work with people all the time, and we see this all too often, that people get really, really concentrated in their qualified account. So qualified account is an account that qualifies for special tax treatment because the government said so. So if it's an IRA, you get to not pay taxes on the portion of income that you put into a traditional part and pay the tax on it later when you take out the original amount plus the earnings. Or, a Roth, if you you have to pay the taxes on it now, and you get tax-free growth down the road. So, if you're going to concentrate in one rather than the other, I think it would almost be better to concentrate in the Roth side of it, depending on your tax bracket. But, the point is that I think that people get way too concentrated in those qualified types of accounts just because they don't want to pay taxes today. And I think, we're constantly encouraging people to step back, take a longer term view. Don't be so short-sighted and so focused on what taxes are today, but, consider taxes from the big picture. So the Secure Act 2.0, that was a law that changed some limits. And what are the implications for this year? Because, that the Secure 2.0 Act changed things in the year that it was passed, but also has some provisions going into the future. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. So this is another example of tax acts just basically changing rules, right? And when you open them up, it's like, wow, I didn't know that until you actually, start applying it. So Secure Act 2.0 allowed for a very specific age group within even at over 50, which is age 60 to 63. So there's just 3 years in there. Is that arbitrary? I don't know. To have increases from 7,500 to about 11,250 for 2025. So there's just a very specific numbers and specific age group that was added to this act and wasn't implemented till this year. That covers government and private employer plans with those. So 401k, 403b, 457b plans, and the other ones that are listed.
Right. So now, just as in true fashion of IRS, to add more regulation, more complication to the tax code. I guess Congress did this, but so now if you have all of these different limits, if you're under 50 in 2025, you can contribute $23,500 to your employer-sponsored plan on a pre-tax basis. If you're over 50, then you get to add another $7,500 on top of that. So you have a $31,000 limit. But if you're in that narrow window of age 60 to 63, you get to add $11,500. So it's the good thing is, I think that, that a lot of employers have some pretty decent tools on their websites to help you, figure out where you need to be. And then, there's all of these other things that they've added in now, whereas, and it was a little bit, the lines were a little bit muddied for me, but in 2024, now if you make over $145,000, if you're going to make these extra catch-up contributions, you've got to do it in a Roth account instead of the traditional side of it. So, lots of things. So what would you really suggest for people, kind of who are in that stage where they're accumulating money, they're using their employer plan to do it? Where would you suggest that they start with all of these changes?
Go ask your plan sponsors about some options. I think a lot of things that we run into is that we talk with clients in the private practice, just that they didn't know what they had when they had it, plain and simple. So I don't know, can't speak for all companies, but the education process seems to be limiting on options and actually inquiring. Just learn a little bit, just figure out what your options are. I think that's a good place to start. So for instance, if you have a 401k plan and you're under the age of 60 and you have some time, why don't you go check to see if you have a Roth 401k, and then look at the implications from that. Talk with your tax professional on what that would be if you started contributing to a Roth 401k instead of your traditional. And then just kind of go from there and see what your plans actually are from that standpoint, because it might mean something, or as long as the rules maybe stay the same for the Roths, that could be something good for your future. So in those accumulation ages, other than looking at your employer sponsor plan, definitely look at seeing if you can self-direct it. If you can self-direct it, see if the options will include some of the financial issues partner listed funds that we have. Hopefully you can become a partner and maybe you can self-direct your 401k plan. I know that's very limiting with a lot of places, but it does exist out there. So try that. That's another option to ask for. But no matter what, for the accumulators, I'd like to say under 60, keep having a positive cash flow in your savings, whether it's your liquid savings, local for emergency savings, and then once that's built, continuing that retirement savings, no matter what's going on in your life. I know as a young person, 37, different life stages, sometimes you have to dip into your liquid savings and then you got to build those back up. That's okay. But if you continue that mindset, then you're going to be all right for retirement. Everything's going to be okay, even though the world wants to tell us it's not. So I have a little bit more positive outlook. So
Another limit that's changing is the standard deduction. What's the standard deduction for 2025?
So married filing jointly is going to be $30,000, and then if you're a single filer individual, it's going to be $15,000. So.
Yeah. So we don't want to leave the retirees out. You know, we talked about the accumulators, but then there are people that have already retired. They're starting to use their income. So one way that you can use this is if you're over 70 and a half, consider using a qualified charitable distribution to be able to get some money, you know, especially if you've socked away a lot of money in that pre-tax type of account. Start getting some of that out. Do your giving with your IRA, and then use those standard deduction limits to try to move some money out of those qualified accounts, especially if you're really heavily concentrated. Look at what the tax brackets would be, and if you're a generous giver, you know, consider. Look at whether you want to itemize or use the standard deduction. You could actually even, do an alternating strategy where you double up your giving in one year. Maybe you do your giving for 2025 all at the beginning of this year, and then maybe at the end of the year, you do your giving for 2026, and then that gives you more than what the standard deduction would be. And then the next year, you just use the standard deduction and get the most out of it. Well, thanks, Jason, for being here. Appreciate that. Hope you guys have gleaned some things. If you're listening on a station that only carries the short version of the show, we wish you a farewell. For everyone else, stick around. We've got more financial issues to come.
Kids all across the nation are facing challenges such as isolation and loneliness and bullying, but there's still hope and the love of Jesus, and we want to bring that to those kids.
Today, Crossroads has 6 focus regions across the country. We are committed to adding 5 more regional coordinators, reaching more kids than ever before. But we can't do it without you.
God is doing something new, and we can see it in the lives of kids across America. Children are finding hope and belonging and community and purpose in the love of Jesus. The gospel is going into schools, and we need your help. We are trusting God to raise $200,000 of new funding. This funding will allow us to have 5 additional focus regions, as well as a team member who will oversee all of our regions. Please join us for this Drive for 5 in 2025. Let's place 5 new team members in cities around the nation and watch what God will do.
To help spread the love of Jesus to children across the country, go to crossroadskidsclub.com/5 in 2025.
Securities offered through GA Reppel & Company, a registered broker-dealer and investment advisor, member FINRA and SIPC. Opinions expressed by Shana are hers alone and are for informational purposes only and do not necessarily represent those of GA Reppel or the outlet on which you are listening. You should consider how the information applies to your situation prior to personally implementing it and consult any financial professional you work with to make sure it's applicable to your financial plan.
Welcome back to Financial Issues, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that segment with Shana and Jason. I always love listening to their insight, and many of you do as well. Seth Udinsky here. I'll be taking you the rest of the way on today's program here. We're live today, so I hope you will join the lively chat, as it always is. Many of you on there. Good to see so many of you talking about the potential of annexing Greenland and Canada and Mexico to the United States empire. I personally would not be necessarily a fan of that, but that's one of the topics of conversation among many others in the lively chat this morning. So join that over on financialissues.org. The easiest way to find it, just go to the website, financialissues.org, click the Watch Live button. I think that's it. Let me just confirm that. Yeah, it's financialissues.org. It's under the show, and then under Watch, just click Watch Live. That'll take you right to the chat page, and you can join that chat there. Well, let's move here to the markets, folks. So following a good day to open the week, the markets slipped a little bit yesterday. So by midday, the indices were all in negative territory as rising Treasury yields coupled with Tuesday's release of the U.S. service sector numbers kind of led some to worry that inflation will continue to remain sticky. And I believe we talked about that a little bit on yesterday's program as well, so you can go back and listen to that. By late afternoon, the indices continued downward while the U.S. 10-year Treasury yields continued jumping up. They jumped about 6 basis points, almost to 4.7%. I'll give you the numbers where they are in just a moment. But by Tuesday's closing bell, the Dow Jones finished about 0.4% negative. The S&P 500 was over a full percent negative, and the NASDAQ was almost 2 full percentage points negative. Part of that, too, was based on some sell-offs as well, specifically in the tech sector. The pre-markets this morning were kind of down slightly as the indices were looking to come back from some of those sell-offs there. As we sit right now, let's take a look at where the markets are opening right now. Very close to the flat line. I mean, it's almost unchanged. The Dow's slightly positive, the S&P slightly negative, same with the NASDAQ, slightly negative. But the Dow and the S&P are basically at the flat line there. Let me do one more refresh here just to make sure I've got the most up-to-date numbers here. Yeah, so that's what it's looking like there, really. The U.S. 10-year Treasury yields, again, I mentioned they've been creeping up a little bit. They're up over 4.7% right now. Meanwhile, oil is trending right around $74.50 a barrel. So that's what we're looking like today, folks. Be on the lookout in the next probably week and a half. We'll start to see companies reporting their earnings from Q4 of 2024. So we're in that kind of liminal space between the end of the quarter and the beginning of the earnings season for that quarter. Got about one more week again until some of the big ones will start reporting in the middle of January. Boy, it is great to be here with you all this morning, and I hope that you are having a great day and enjoying being here with us as well. Did want to welcome many of our new listeners here to the show today. Many of you were gifted partnerships. You might be listening for the first time. So welcome. And many of you found us through CSN and through NRB as well. If you're watching on social media, if you're listening on a local radio station, it's great to have you, and we're excited and thrilled to have you here. Sam, welcome to you, brother. What do you say we tackle one of these questions here, man, shall we?
Yes, sir. I mean, what if I don't want to? What happens then?
That would be, I'll tell you what, that would make for great radio. If we were
the
like...
rest of the show's us fighting over
back and forth. Yes,
we're
going to do it. No, we're not. Yes, we are. No, we're not.
Okay, I'll give in. I'll read the question here. So this is from Pamela. She's 66 years old, and she says, I understand the buy list is for new money only. So what is the money we get from a sell considered to be? Old money? What if we want to use that money to buy positions in another stock? Do we choose from the broad list? And what is the purpose of the broad list? So kind of two questions there, Seth. One is, what is the money we get from a sell? And then two, what do we do with it?
Yeah. So that's a great question there, Pamela. Thank you for that. Let's tackle your first one first. So the money you get from a sell, we would consider that technically not new money. It's money that you've already invested that has just grown. So you can thank God that your strategy has done well, that you've been able to see some returns there. And so I would say that money there is simply money that's already been invested that has now grown that you can then use to possibly redeploy. That's different from new money. I would consider new money would be money that you have not invested yet. So say, for example, you receive a cash gift for Christmas or something like that, or maybe you receive a bonus at work or a raise from work and you want to take that money and invest that money. It's money that you haven't invested yet. That's what we consider new money. Either way, though, I do think that money that you're talking about that you get from a sell is great to put into the stocks on the buy list there. So if you get profits from a stock that you already own and you want to redeploy some of that money, the buy list is the perfect place to look for that, actually. And that does get to that issue of what many would call profit taking. Our strategy here at the ministry at profit taking really is that the best thing that you can and should do with the profits from your from the stocks that you own is to reinvest them. And so the buy list is the perfect place to put this money, and also would be a great place for your new money as well. If you get that cash gift and you want to invest it, check out the positions that are on the buy list there. Of course, you have to consider if you're in those proper allocations, and so you're not getting too overly balanced in one or the other. All those things would really be up to you in the situation that you're in there, Pamela. But I hope that makes sense there, kind of the difference between new money and money that you've already invested. Now, to your second question, so the purpose of the broad list is not to put new money to work in stocks on the broad list. That's for the buy list only. And I would say same thing for money that you have reinvested as well. So money that maybe some profit money that you have. The broad list is not to be purchased from. Okay, so we have to remind listeners of that from time to time. The broad list, to answer your question about what the purpose of it is, it's really a comprehensive list of companies that we have our eyes on for potential investment. Oftentimes, you'll find what happens is that you may purchase a stock when it's on the buy list, and then you will see that stock move from the buy list to the broad list. There's no need to panic there. That doesn't mean that it's a sell. All that means really is we believe that this company is no longer a good company for people placing new money into it for the first time, placing reinvested money into it for the first time. So if you're buying that stock for the first time and it's on the broad list, we would tell you don't do that. It would be much better to look for stocks that are on the buy list. Now, if a stock moves to the broad list and you already have that stock, you can certainly add to that position because you already have it. But if you don't have that position, it would not be good for you to put money into that position. That's kind of the difference between the buy list and the broad list there. I actually think, Pamela, a good way to think about the broad list is to call it the hold list in your mind, because it may be, you may find that there are quite a few stocks that have moved to the broad list and you're just holding those stocks there. We don't call it that because it just makes more sense to call it the broad list, because it's just more it's a broader list than the buy list is. The buy and the broad list are not opposites, but they kind of work in sort of that way with each other where they're not exactly the same. So once again, we would caution against buying stuff off of the broad list. It would be far better for you to buy from the buy list. And if you are already holding a position that's on the broad list, depending on your circumstance, it might be okay for you to add to that position, to average down to it, to dollar cost average, different things like that. Pamela, I hope that makes sense. That was a great question, and I do appreciate you asking that. Folks, if you have questions like Pamela's, please feel free to ask. There are no stupid questions here. We want to make sure that everybody has a comprehensive understanding of the things that we're talking about. And sometimes we'll use language that's familiar to people who have listened to the show. So if something is confusing to you, like buy list, broad list, ask us. We'd love to be able to help you out. All right, we got Craig Haugaard coming up here with the Ag Report, and then we got more financial issues coming up right after this. You're not going to want to go anywhere. Here comes Craig Haugaard with today's Ag.
This is Craig Haugaard with your Financial Issues Ag Update for January 8th. Corn benefited marginally from traders trying to front-run the index fund rebalancing, which began begins today. Historically, the rebalance has usually underperformed expectations. The more impactful event's going to be on January 10th when we get the USDA's annual production report. Yesterday found March corn a whopping 1/4 cent higher at $5.48 per bushel. Soybeans are currently driven by conditions of the South American crop, and right now weather maps for South America don't appear to be threatening enough to get the markets overly excited. Forecasts currently look a bit wetter for Argentina, while central and southern Brazil are expected to see another round of rains over the next couple of weeks. At the close, March beans were 1/2 cent lower at $9.97 1/4. Wheat got a little support from the monthly crop conditions ratings, which were released Monday night. The general takeaway from the numbers is that the Upper Plains states are in marginal to poor conditions, while the core Southern Plains and Midwest crop are in fair to good conditions overall versus history. Of course, this is the snapshot of a dormant crop, and these ratings have nearly zero correlation with final yield. But for yesterday, it gave traders something to trade. At the close, Minneapolis March wheat was 2.5 cents higher at $5.94 3/4. Kansas City rose by 2.5 cents to close at $5.55 3/4, and we had Chicago 2 cents higher at $5.42 1/2. Cotton futures had a stagnant session. When the closing bell finally rang, March futures were down 17 points at 68.51. Livestock futures were mixed once again. February live cattle were 37.5 cents higher at $195.57 1/2 per hundredweight. March feeder cattle were $2.37 1/2 stronger as they closed out the day at $267.92 1/2 per hundred. And February lean hog futures dropped by 47.5 cents, closing out the session at $79.17 1/2 per hundredweight. Class 3 milk futures traded both sides before closing lower. February futures were down 22 points for the day at $20.90. Well, this has been Craig Haugaard with your Financial Issues Ag Update. We'll be right back with more financial issues after this.
When God calls us to follow Him, it starts as a personal conviction.
When I realized what I had been investing my money in, God immediately convicted my heart.
But as we experience the joy that comes from following God, we encourage others to join us in our journey.
If anybody's listening, thinking about joining, there's nothing like it.
As more people join us, our impact for Christ compounds.
Align your investments with your faith. Become an FISM partner today at financialissues.org.
If a woman sees her baby on ultrasound, it doubles the likelihood that she'll choose life. On top of that, we share the gospel of Jesus Christ with her. This is why you should support preborn.
Then they sat me down. If you were to die today, do you think you would go to heaven? And I was like, no. Keeping the child was my first stepping stone. And ever since then, God has cleaned me up from the inside out.
Help support women in need. Go to preborn.com/FISM.
Every day, kids all across America are coming to school with some kind of hidden pain.
I've seen kids come in who are just so confused about what's right and what's wrong, just having no idea that God loves them. And this just breaks my heart. Crossroads has the opportunity to bring the Word of God right into the public school, to reach children right where they are.
And when we see that happen, we see God changing lives.
We want to see kids not only come to Christ, but pursue a lifelong relationship with Him. And so local churches are uniquely positioned to disciple those children as they become young adults and through their lifespan.
Crossroads comes alongside a church and provides that church with a club structure, curriculum, training, and ongoing coaching for them to run these outreaches in public schools.
If you are burdened for the children of America, consider making a donation to Crossroads Kids Club. For more information, visit reachOurschools.com. That's reachOurschools.com.
The opinions and recommendations expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the opinions of the station or any of the program sponsors. Additionally, all products or services offered by the program sponsors may not be known by the program.
Welcome back, folks. Financial issues. Okay, so in the chat, I saw several comments there, people talking about the legacy media and kind of it's starting to realize that it might be in for a world of hurts coming up here. And I, for one, am for it. I think the legacy media has become just one of the, really one of the most pathetic, evil kind of I don't know if you call it organization or conglomeration in our country. But man, if the legacy media can get defunded, boy, that would just be a great thing. Well, it seems like the tide is turning here. And Sam, I'd love to get your thoughts on this headline that we have about Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg seeming like he's jumping on the free speech bandwagon. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Sam. What's going on here?
Well, to your point about the legacy media, it's important to note that one of the reasons it's in a world of hurt is because of social media and how people are freely allowed to share information and express their opinions. A lot of that originated from Elon Musk on X. And it looks like Mark Zuckerberg, now with the election of Donald Trump, is realizing, hey, that's kind of where the cultural tide is going. So I'm going to take some from that playbook too and make Facebook, Instagram, Threads, all those different websites that are under the Meta umbrella more open to free speech. So some of those changes he's making is he's going to bring back community notes. That's something that's on X, and get rid of these biased fact checkers that have been making life miserable on Facebook for people for the past, 5 to 6 years. So here's a clip of him talking about what that's going to look like. So here's Zuckerberg.
After Trump first got elected in 2016, the legacy media wrote nonstop about how misinformation was a threat to democracy. We tried in good faith to address those concerns without becoming the arbiters of truth. But the fact checkers have just been too politically biased and have destroyed more trust than they've created, especially in the US.
Okay, so you hear there, he's getting rid of these biased fact checkers because that's part of the problem. Yeah. He's like, we don't want to become the arbiter of truth here at Facebook, but the problem is the fact checkers, by their very nature, are the arbiters of truth, and oftentimes they're liberal arbiters of truth. So things that are just up to opinion, they tend to say, like, no, that's not true because it doesn't match my worldview. So if you've been on X, you know what this is going to turn into. What's going to happen now is that the people get to fact check these things and add their own context if they want to, and that provides a little bit more of an unbiased way to fact check these various things if people want to, or just add more nuance. Meanwhile, Meta will also be ending restrictions on more controversial topics like gender and immigration. Here's Zuckerberg again.
We're going to simplify our content policies and get rid of a bunch of restrictions on topics like immigration and gender that are just out of touch with mainstream discourse. What started as a movement to be more inclusive has increasingly been used to shut down opinions and shut out people with different ideas, and it's gone too far. So I want to make sure that people can share their beliefs and experiences on our platforms.
Boy, you'd think that would be the point of Facebook to begin with.
Right.
But, sadly, if you've been on there since, about 2016, you know that's not the case. Other good things coming out, they're going to be dialing back content filters to focus only on illegal content and major violations. To this point, Facebook and Meta, they had these automatic filters that would sweep through the website trying to pick up things that go against their guidelines, but because it's automatic, it doesn't always get things right and ends up censoring things that really shouldn't be censored in the first place. It's also bringing back political content. If you know that political content was not available during the last couple elections because they were trying to keep Facebook stress-free, but that also limits the conversations. Also, they're moving Meta's trust and safety content moderation teams from California to Texas. And interestingly enough, they're going to be working with the Trump administration to push back on foreign governments trying to pressure American companies to censor speech. So you might know that European or Australian governments are trying to pressure companies like Twitter to crack down on free speech because it doesn't match their own speech codes. They're trying to pressure, basically aggregate censorship into the U.S. by the way of these companies, and Facebook's going to be working with the Trump administration to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I mean, this is really good stuff. Now, Sam, I don't know what you think of this. I don't think I still trust Mark Zuckerberg. We're going to need to see, a legacy of kind of going in a different direction, because it has been, you're right, it's been probably like 8 years of Facebook really kind of being one of the poster children, along with YouTube, with all due respect to our YouTube overlords right now who might cut us after I say this, of cracking down on free speech. I mean, and we've been the personal recipients of that as we've gotten cut from both Facebook and YouTube multiple times. But man, I do think he's learning from Elon. People don't want censored speech. Nobody wants that. Like nobody in their right mind wants to be told you're allowed to say this, you're not allowed to say this. Free speech is not censored speech. And look, I'm all for actual good moral limits on free speech. I'll give you an example. I would love for Meta to ban pornography on all their sites. I think it's good that there are certain rules, like it's not a good idea to shout fire in a movie theater, different things like that. But you can still have free speech and have rules like that. Common sense, of course, says this might be, and I don't know what you think about this, Sam, this might just be kissing the soon-to-be ring of the top dog for Meta. But I'm for it either way. If he's just sucking up to Trump.
Yeah, it goes back to what we've been saying for the last couple of days with these cultural shifts, is that does it really even matter why they're doing it? All we care is that the outcome is good. Interesting thing about Zuckerberg is he's been making noises about free speech for a long time. Yeah. So I do wonder if in his heart of hearts he does believe a version of these things. He gave a speech, I think it was 5 years ago, about the importance of free speech and how tech platforms can propagate these things. Yeah. But then he's just never done it. So I don't know if the issue is that the incentive structure's not been there during this video. He talks about how the Biden administration's been putting a lot of pressure on him to censor stuff. So maybe it just comes down to he's a coward with good ideas and he's too afraid to implement them. I don't know if that's the case. It's very confusing based on what he says versus what he does. Yeah. But trust but verify. That's basically what I'm going to say. He's said a lot of good things in the past. He's saying good things now. He's not always lived up to those things. So let's see what this is going to be now that Trump is president, and maybe he's going to feel more empowered to actually live up to his promises.
I certainly hope so. And I think it goes without saying. I mean, this is obvious. Had Kamala won the election, he wouldn't be doing this.
No way. No way.
So, but this is a result of what happened, I think, and this is something that we can be excited about for sure. In no way does this mean invest in Meta. The company is not biblically responsible, and I would wonder if it ever will be ever again. But I still think this is great news for us, just for us as a ministry here. I think this will actually give us more protection on Facebook. I don't think we have to worry as much about getting cut on Facebook. Love to see it. So YouTube, you're next. All right. Please don't cut me when I say this, but you're next. Do what Zuckerberg's doing.
The sad thing about YouTube is it used to be a great website for being able to say pretty much whatever you wanted, but then it got bought by Google, and then things just went down the drain pretty quickly.
For sure. Yeah. So if our YouTube audience is still here, that means we haven't gotten cut yet. But hopefully YouTube follows suit there. That's great stuff, Sam. Well, let's move over to some other good news here quickly before the end of the show. It looks like McDonald's might be rolling back on some of their DEI stuff. Sam, what's been going on there?
Changing cultural winds here. This is absolutely huge. That is, McDonald's is now the latest major company to roll back at least some of its DEI stuff. On Monday, McDonald's became the latest company to do so, as reported by Fox Business. The changes include McDonald's scrapping its aspirational representation goals, getting rid of its DEI pledge for suppliers, changing the name of its diversity team to Global Inclusion Team. That doesn't really matter, but whatever. Yeah. And also they're ending external surveys. It should also important to note, while it doesn't say what those external surveys are, we're all pretty sure what those are referring to is that it's going to be cutting ties with the HRC's Corporate Equality Index. What that is it gauges companies based on how LGBT friendly they are, and in the most radical possible ways, such as supplying funding for gay pride parades or transgender treatments for their employees. McDonald's saying we're not going to have anything to do with that. The only corporate surveys we're going to do are going to relate to our business, and I think they said most of them are going to be internal from this point on, so they're not going to be influenced by what anyone else has to say, but the market and how well they're doing things. McDonald's said the changes were largely stemming from the Supreme Court's 2024 decision against affirmative action on college campuses. Interestingly enough, that's been seeing some spillover into the corporate world as well. Many of these companies we're seeing abandoning DEI are citing that Supreme Court case, saying, well, if you can't discriminate based on race for hiring or bringing in kids to college campuses, you probably can't do that in business either. So they're citing that. Also, our friend Robbie Starbuck, anti-DEI activist, said that he had warned McDonald's a couple days ago that he was going to release a new report report on all the DEI woke stuff they're doing, and he said he'd release that if they didn't renege on what they're doing, and sure enough, they did. So it's
awesome.
Probably a double pressure campaign there coming from the laws from the Supreme Court, but also from activists such as Robbie Starbuck, and that's why you're seeing McDonald's pull back on this stuff.
That's great. And folks, we got to keep the pressure on. This is great stuff. You know, hopefully this could be the first rumblings of the avalanche to lead to McDonald's returning to a company that would qualify as BRIs. You know, right now, of course, this is just a good sign. They're not BRI. They were one day. This was actually one of Dan's favorite companies way back a long time ago. I believe it was somewhere around, I want to say 2015 or 2016, somewhere around there. Dan had to issue a sell alert for this company because it was getting involved in the culture war. It was likely the LGBTQ stuff right around the time of the, I believe it was the Obergefell case. So it's fascinating to now see them backtracking on the culture war, folks. This is good stuff, and we need to praise God for it and keep the foot to the gas pedal there. You all are doing a great job. Keep on fighting the good fight with the investment dollars that God has given to you. Of course, we've come to the end of the program today, so I hope you enjoyed it. Lord willing, we'll do it again tomorrow. Until then, remember, everything you have belongs to the Lord. Let's be found good and faithful stewards with it. God bless you all. See you tomorrow.
If we ever forget that we're one nation under God, then we will be a nation gone under.
Thank you for joining us. This has been an FISM production.